Okay. Glory to Jesus Christ. Well, we're picking up where we left off with a short guide to Orthodox Christianity Catechism, published by SVS Press. The author, of course, is His Eminence Metropolitan Hilarion Alfeyev. We've actually, in our parish bookstore, sold the last one. So we'll have to get some more in here as we carry on. It is divided, as you know, into 3 sections. And we're now in the 3rd and final section. For those of you who are with us tonight via Zoom and Facebook, we keep promising we'll have the new equipment, but now we've got the funds in hand. And I think very soon we'll have the new equipment. So we'll be able to actually do what we want to do and achieve that in a better fashion. But just by way of some review, the first section was dealing with doctrine, and that's actually the sort of normal place for us to begin. The second section, he dealt with Christian morality, ethics, and lifestyle. And at first I was like, it's interesting that he's gone in that direction for the second choice. But that's what he did, and then, of course, it all makes sense. And then he's dovetailing very, very nicely into the 3rd section, which is the church and divine worship. Okay, so we got that part down? Good, okay. So for the next session, next week, I want you to read through the first section, which deals with the Theotokos and the saints. There's a great chart here, which has the 10 categories of saints, and then take it into the next section, which is the Lord's Prayer, or prayer, but we begin, of course, with the Lord's Prayer, okay? So we're good with that? Next week, 1 and 2 of the 3rd section. We're good? Okay. So, to kind of prepare us for moving through section 3, I'm going to do what I did in the other 2 sections, which is to give us a little background, a little bit of foundation, so we can then move through things with a little more clarity about how all the pieces kind of fit together and build. Okay? So I have, as I told you before, in my previous job, my day job was selling books, I think. So we have books, and there are some that I'm going to put up here. Then I'll pass them around so you can see them. Okay, one of the complexities about being an Orthodox Christian and just the very topic of worship is, well, I once heard Archimandrite say to me that he was a master chef, and he said, cooking is like theater. It requires an audience. Well, in many ways, Orthodox worship is like that, in that it doesn't just require an audience, because it's not theater, it's not performance, but it requires an awful lot of people in different places and in different roles. And until you've actually experienced a full hierarchical liturgy with everybody in their place, and everybody knowing exactly what the response is like, you don't quite get it. In just about any book you read about Orthodox Christianity, maybe the most famous being Metropolitan Hilarion Alfeyev's book on the Orthodox Church, there will be some reference to the Kievan Chronicles, where Saint Vladimir, now Saint Vladimir, just a little side from St. Vladimir's, okay? Before his conversion to Christianity, St. Vladimir's religion was what? Yeah, and it's specific for people from the Scandinavian background. He's a Viking. Yes, and so conquering and war and slaughter and sacrifice and rape and pillage It was all there. It wasn't as if he didn't know Christianity, because Grandma Olga was an Orthodox Christian. But it was just a heck of a lot more fun being a Viking than, of course, doing all that stuff that Grandma does. Fasting? What in the world is that? But after a major victory at war, he decided to offer human sacrifice to the gods. And it just so happened the lot fell to a father and a son. And it had an impact on him. And there was something in his interior which we would now call the process of conversion, which it began. He sent his emissaries around the world exploring different religions. And of course, they went to Rome and experienced Latin Christianity. They went through the Middle East and explored Islam. They explored Judaism. And then they went to Constantinople. And it's recorded in the Kievan Chronicles that they were so awestruck in the worship in Hagia Sophia. They said that they did not know whether they were in heaven or on earth. Okay? Remarkable. So that's what they took back and reported to Vladimir, and it was then missionaries from Constantinople who came to bring the gospel to the Russian people. In 988, there was the great baptism of the Rus. And something happened in 1988 that actually impacted this community here, I think. Maybe not directly, but it had an impact on this community. That was the 1,000-year celebration of the coming of Christianity to the Russian people, the millennium year. And Mikhail Gorbachev thought, well, okay, as part of his, you remember the term, perestroika, sort of little shifting, little lightening of things a bit. It was like, well, this is a good thing. At least at one thing, the struggling Russian economy would get an awful lot of foreign strong currency, because this would be a big year of celebration. And indeed it was. But basically the sort of catacomb Orthodox Church that had been underground or operating, in safe zones up here at the top, took it very seriously. And they say it's kind of like putting toothpaste back in the tube. Once it was out and up from the catacombs, it wasn't going back. And the people themselves were like, now we remember who we are. The number of baptisms that took place was remarkable. And as I said, it created an entire revival. And eventually, it would overthrow communism altogether in 1991. But in the Eastern Bloc countries that were in the Soviet sphere, like Romania, 1989 was the year in which they threw it all off. So when I say, how does that impact this community? Well, we were founded in 1994, which was the bicentennial year of the coming of Christianity to North America. But, just 3 years after overthrowing communism, there was much, you remember in the old days, that was influencing us and the rest of Orthodox Christianity as we were, again, free in a sort of major way with the great population of the former Soviet Union, returning to their Orthodox faith. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody did, but it does mean that there was an incredible revival. I remember dealing with young people, especially in my work with the OCF at Kansas State. Their parents were not believers. And in fact, their parents had been very hostile to Christianity and the message of the gospel. But grandparents, particularly Baba, the grandmother, was very faithful. And many of them had been secretly baptized. And when we talk about baptism and sort of getting ourselves back into a proper rhythm and track, things that we're looking at here in the Catechism. We don't have the problem around here, but there are parishes where priests are still fighting customs that came into the church through communism as a safety factor, and people will request that the priest come and do the baptism of the great-grandchild in the bathtub at home. Why is that?
Secret.
Yes, secret. That's the way that they did it. So the whole thing of trying to restore baptism within the context of the faith community is not that old in terms of the restoration process. So we're still kind of working to recover that. So a lot of the things that we look at in catechism and a lot of things that we look at in terms of our understanding of our worship also means that we have to sort of break bad habits, bad practices, and things that sort of crept in there. I've said so many times in a Greek context, we have to shed yaya theology. And yaya theology, I'm not picking on grandma there. Yaya is the Greek way of saying grandmother. But it's just that there was so little teaching and it was dangerous. And so a lot of things just sort of got picked up. I think I may have already shared with you what I think is the worst example, which is grandmothers telling these enthusiastic grandchildren, and I'm not talking about little kids, I'm talking about people in the military and things who began to embrace the faith. They would hear from their grandmothers, don't take communion at Pascha, because hookers and other bad people, they show up that night and take communion, so you don't want to be taking communion with them. Well, there you go. So it's that kind of thing. But I mean, this is the sort of thing that just completely distorts our faith and our understanding of worship, not from the outside, but inside. And so that's the other thing I'd say to you tonight. We've got a lot of things that we Orthodox go defensive on that comes from the outside, and we'll talk about some of that. But there's also stuff on the inside that we just simply have to unpack, correct, and go with it. Okay? So any questions so far? Anything you want to add? Anything you've learned already in the first 10 minutes that you didn't know before?
There was some truth in the series about the Vikings that they went to groups and they portrayed the Vikings actually brought their religion and so forth to Russia. And so it sounds like that was true.
That was it. I once met a remarkable, absolutely remarkable Orthodox metropolitan in, as we now say, Kiev. I actually went out on, I think it was a Tuesday night, to, speak to a group of Orthodox teens. Being American, I was thinking, oh, there'll be 15, 20 kids. The place was packed, absolutely packed, and it's because this metropolitan was really, really connecting with his people. And I would guess him to be, pretty young, 36, 37, 38, but he had bright, bright red hair, remarkable. Bright red hair and a bright beard. And so I did a stupid thing. I said, so where does the red hair come from? And he looked at me and he said, probably the Vikings. Well, that just shows how far Viking influence came when you go clear down into the area of Kiev. He wasn't making a joke, by the way. It was like, yeah, probably. Okay, so we're good so far? So, in terms of the complexities of sort of structuring worship in one way, I'm going to give you some things. If you really get, interested in doing some of this stuff, then do it. There's this book which is called The Typicon Decoded. It's by Archimandrite Job Getcha. The old-timers will remember I once got invited to go to Winnipeg, Canada, at about this time of the year. It was pre-Lent. It was part of a sort of pre-Lenten series. And I was following a whole group of prominent speakers. I just happened to have been following Father Peter Gilquist. So it was my turn. And there were some things there that I often, repeating it, I said, it's lucky I got out of my life. Because, I certainly didn't have my filter on, and I was just following my instructions. And there were some things that some folks just didn't like hearing, but that's the way it was. Well, there is an Orthodox theological college in Winnipeg. It's very small. It's under the Ukrainians, and I met a seminarian, Job Getcha. And lo and behold, Job Getcha is now a metropolitan under the ecumenical patriarch. He was, for a period of time, the Archbishop of Paris. That's when this book actually was produced, or at least published. He had the manuscript while he was archimandrite, then made bishop. But it's a remarkable book, and even excellent liturgists like His Grace Bishop Basil, when he got this in his hand, it was like, devour this thing, okay? So I'll send it around if you want. But that's it. But that just shows you just sort of, what it takes to sort of put it all together, okay? As I said, it takes the team. There's a companion book, which is Decoding the Ephilogion, okay? Which is the small book of needs, like when I'm carrying around blessing houses, okay? So we're good with that? All right. So there's that one. There's another one. It's called Grand Entrance, okay? Any of you have it? Grand Entrance, Worship on Earth as in Heaven. It's by Professor Edith Humphrey, who I think is probably the most outstanding Orthodox Scripture scholar we have in this country. I just saw today she's going to give the keynote at the Paideia conference, or I'll also be attending in early June at Antiochian Village. The title Grand Entrance is what? Okay, so say a little bit about that in terms of Orthodox worship, because we've got people here that are at different stages. Okay.
Well, it's a long story. Back when the emissaries came from the Rus,
Yeah.
in Constantinople, there was a separate building outside of Hagia Sophia where the gifts were prepared, and so they were actually drawn in to the liturgy, and it was a procession. And so now we reenact that procession within the church itself.
Exactly. There are two altars in the holy place. There's the one where I prepare the gifts, and as Reader Nectaria said, it was a separate place, Scevolasticum. Some new temples are somewhat incorporating that. The baptistry was also in a separate place most of the time, and so that also involved procession. There's a Byzantine Rite Roman Catholic scholar who reposed about 5-6 years ago, Robert Taft. Some of you may have heard that name. He's a remarkable scholar, a Jesuit, Eastern Rite Catholic. He's actually written a book on the Great Entrance. It is about this thick. And there's a famous story of Father Alexander Schmemann, who said when he was asked to review the book, when it was in his hands, he said, "Here's my review. Never has so much been written about so little." But that underscores, again, the importance of the actual movements and things in worship. There's another book, I'll bring it next time. It's published by New Rome Press over in Columbia, Missouri. So don't hold it against them that it's in Columbia, you know. But it's the best book out there, and it's beautifully produced, of taking us through what exactly all of the movements and all the rest are in Orthodox worship.
The brown.
It's a brown. Yeah. Do you know that book?
Yeah, I have it.
You have it. Yeah. Would you?
Around earlier this year.
Oh, did I? See there. I'm getting old. So would you agree with me? It's fabulous commentary. Yeah. Okay. Marvelous. Gee, I got those complaints at SVS Press, so you'll notice our more recent books are rather thick with larger print. There you go. Okay. So here's another one. Ooh, what have I got here? Oh, that's when I introduced him. Oh, there you go. I keep mentioning Father Alexander Schmemann. Again, sometimes in these things I'll repeat myself, but that's okay because there are always new people and others that are joining. I don't think there's any figure of the last century that we owe more of a debt to than Father Alexander Schmemann in terms of understanding Orthodox worship, Orthodox liturgy. I have on many occasions, you know, had to defend myself when I say that my particular position about the theology of Father Schmemann is that he was not an innovationist. He wasn't going around creating new things. He was a restorationist. He was reminding us of things that, as I said earlier in this session, we had or got distorted or we had and we lost it. Here's a test. And it's hard for convert parishes like ours because we don't have sittis, that's Arabic for grandmother, and yayas and babas and other people like that to ask. But if we were in a very ethnic Orthodox parish, and I would say to you, go to one of the elders and ask them, when they were growing up in the church, if they ever had a pre-sanctified liturgy, they will look at you and say no. Yeah, because we lost it. And it's particularly to Father Alexander Schmemann that we actually have it. So, particularly for the newer level people, how and when do we do pre-sanctified liturgies?
Wednesdays during Lent.
Okay, Wednesdays and Fridays.
Wow, we do the afternoon Friday.
The practice in most parishes now is a Wednesday evening pre-sanctified liturgy and a Friday morning pre-sanctified liturgy. Okay, and one of the reasons that the liturgy of the pre-sanctified is done on Friday morning is because most Saturdays during Great Lent also have liturgy on Saturday morning, and so Saturday evening and Saturday morning are basically the same zone. So you can't have two. Now I'm getting you confused, but I'll get to it. I'm going to unpack that in a little bit too. Okay? There's only so much we can do at once. Okay? So this is one of the most remarkable collections of the theology of Father Alexander Schmemann that's out there. I was sorry that the SVS Press didn't get this book, and it won't happen now, I'm sure, but I had an agreement with the author, David Fagerberg. David Fagerberg is a remarkable liturgical scholar, a former Lutheran pastor who converted to Rome and is a professor at Notre Dame. But I think if you scratched him, he'd be breaking out with Orthodox itch all over on the inside. Okay, so this is the Fagerberg book, Liturgy Outside Liturgy. There is another young Anglican scholar who is actually from Kansas City, who has produced another collection of authors dealing with Schmemann. And I used to people, nasty, naughty I can be, saying, isn't it amazing? We have a Roman Catholic and have an Anglican, who seem to be the two that are producing the real kind of reflections on the theology of Alexander Schmemann. Now, we've improved a little on that one, but anyway, that's an interesting little side note. All right, good so far? Here's my last one, okay? Some of you have been asking for a kind of overview of Orthodoxy in terms of culture and theology and ethics and worship in the modern world. This is the one that I'd recommend. Actually, I'm on the back cover of this one, I see. This is Vigan Gurian. What kind of nationality is a surname like Gurian?
I can't even tell what you're saying.
Gurian. What nationality is that?
Not Georgia.
It's Armenian. Okay. So the Armenian Orthodox are part of the Oriental Orthodox. Their seminary, St. Narcissus, is umbrellaed by St. Vladimir's because their numbers are small and they couldn't be accredited otherwise. But he actually worships in St. Patrick's Antiochian Church, which is a Western Rite church in Bealton, Virginia. So now I've confused you, the new ones altogether, talking about a Western Rite. But this is the book that I'd send around for the people that are asking about it. Okay, so the people that are zooming in and on Facebook, you know, again, if something comes up, I don't know how you're going to do it, but communicate with us and we'll try to get you more included. All right, we're good? We're getting that foundation down? We're right on time. Okay. Particularly for those of you that are new and exploring Orthodoxy, one of the things that one finds when a person visits an Orthodox church for the first time is you may hear comments like, boy, that was really weird. Okay? And, you know, let's talk about that for a little bit. You know, you have it. Julia Frederica Matthews Green, who's probably one of the best apologists that we have for the Orthodox faith, okay? Now, I just want to make note here, okay, in case this comes up again. I said already this evening that I think the best Orthodox scripture scholar is who?
This woman.
Edith Humphrey, okay? And probably the best Orthodox apologist is who? Julia Frederica Matthews Green, okay?
Don't forget Margaret Barker.
Yes, and she's a Methodist and all of that, so there you go. So, just in case somebody says, well, what's the role of women in the Orthodox Church? You know, there are plenty, okay, and they're very prominent. But we just happen to know exactly, in terms of worship, the whole structure of priesthood and its history and orientation in terms of the worship of the All-Holy Trinity, and that'll have to just be unpacked at some point. But Frederica Matthews Green, in one of her books, I think it's maybe in Facing East, she describes her husband, who was an Episcopal priest at that point, Father Gregory, sneaking off on a Saturday evening to great vespers, like we just prayed in our temple. And she said that she looks at him and it's as if he's being carried to the third level of heaven. And all she can think about is, my feet hurt. And she says she finally hears the priest say, let us complete our evening prayer unto the Lord. And she says to herself, thank God they're about to wrap this up. And she said they went on and on and on after all of that, okay? One of the things that Metropolitan Hilarion says in here, once he's sort of unpacked everything, and he's talking specifically about Orthodox worship, right at the very beginning he says, length. And it's in all caps. So, you know, he's shouting at us. So it's length, okay? So another Russian saying is that they are the best converts because unlike the Greeks, they haven't cut things out. Things they were given by the Greeks, they've kept them in, okay? So things like prayers for the catechumens. In this parish, we pray them because we have catechumens, right? Very simple. Why did they disappear in Greece?
There weren't any.
There weren't any because everybody, including the dogs and cats, were Orthodox. You know, it just simply permeated the culture and creation at every single level, okay? They now have catechumens, by the way. So it'll be interesting to see if the Church of Greece restores the prayers of the catechumens. We're catching up, okay? It's generally communities like ours that are just simply folding it back in, and that's how it goes. All right, so the whole question of worship, let's back this up a little bit more. You and I, as human beings, naturally gravitate to worship. Yes?
We just don't know. Most of us don't know how. We may know it when we see it, but we don't know how.
Exactly, okay? And particularly, well, you have primitive mankind that generally worship nature because they were awestruck by things of nature. They were also fearful of nature. You know, when the volcano erupts on the island and wipes everybody out, maybe it's best with that angry, fiery God that we keep offering sacrifices and other such things from time to time to appease them, okay? So nature worship, natural for man, okay? Anybody disagree with that? Okay? So the whole concept of nature in itself. In Orthodox Christianity, we're kind of out of step with the rest of Christianity and even understanding creation. Because it's so hard to put all of this in a cap, but Orthodox Christianity isn't like you see on a lot of bumper stickers. Orthodox Christianity founded in 33 AD. Okay, yeah, there was Pentecost in 33 AD. Yeah, okay. But in fact, our history doesn't begin there. Where does it begin? It begins in the act of creation itself, right? Okay. Yeah, exactly. So even the structure in our temples, the places for the Old Testament prophets, and their incorporation. We heard Old Testament readings tonight, 3 of them. Okay. So when some people say we're Marcion heretics and we've abandoned the Old Testament scriptures, you can say, nah, we haven't.
No, you just haven't come to Vespers or Orthros.
Exactly. So it's all there.
And Lent, you get to read Job.
Exactly. So, or Job or Proverbs, depending on the cycle. Okay. So, worship in terms of how we understand creation, in the scriptures themselves, in the act of creation, God says it is good. Okay? So, has God changed his mind and is no damn good?
No, Jesus said, not one tittle is going to be changed.
Exactly. Okay? So, where does all this bad stuff come historically?
Protestants.
Oh, for heaven's sake, stop that.
Well, really Augustine, but it really came to full fruition with the Protestant Reformation.
Yes. Well, the issue with Protestants and worship is it is just as Reader Nectario said, they don't know how to do it because they were so busy protesting what they saw as the abuses of the Pope of Rome. They turned their eyes to Jews to see, well, you know, before the Pope distorted all of this, how did Jesus do it? So you want to look to the Jews, but there's an awful lot of history there, about 1,500 years worth, that they were totally unaware of, okay? In the book of Acts, it says that the Christians continued to worship where? In the temple, okay? So Orthodox Christian worship is actually the extension of temple worship. And when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, Jews no longer had priesthood. no longer had altars, no longer had sacrifice, no longer had the temple. All of those things are gone. So what did they have?
Auditorium.
Yeah, and they had, well, basically synagogue worship. So the Protestants looking to see, well, how do we do this, worship like Jesus? Synagogue worship consists of basically three things. What are they? Scripture readings, commentary on the scripture reading, and the singing of psalms, hymns, right? Okay, so Protestant worship, what's it look like? That's what it looks like. No altar, that's replaced with a pulpit being center, no priesthood, okay, and no connection to church history. I remember speaking to a group of Mennonites at Kansas State back in the days of Noah, and one of those Mennonite students at the end of the session said, Father Chet, I just want to thank you. He said, we only know history from the 1500s.
At least they say,
yes, and he said that night, he said it was eye-opening, and it's not talked about. In fact, it's skewed. It's like we don't need to know that because that was somehow distorted by the Pope. I also like to remind our Protestant friends that we dealt with the Pope 500 years before they did. So, calm down. So the whole question here then of nature gets inverted, okay? Because in Orthodox Christianity, particularly at Pascha, we hear this so beautifully. Phrases like, all of creation groans in anticipation of redemption, okay? Oh my word, you can short circuit some people with language like that, but it's like, it's because they recognize material things are bad. Reader Nectarius and I read Paul Kingsnorth, and he recently had in his Substack something called Matter Matters. Okay? So for us as Orthodox Christians, we recognize that God's creation is good, and therefore we recognize also in our humanity, after through our disobedience, sin and death enter into the world, that our reflection of the glory of God, doxa, and we understand that in creation Adam and Eve were radiating the glory of God. It's diminished, but it's not extinguished. So that's really important for us. So as Orthodox Christians, our understanding of theosis, which we've talked about before, is we're trying to get the flame brighter. So in our lives, we reflect the glory of God because we were created how? In His image and in His likeness, and we forget what that means. And then, sadly, we fall into the puritanical distortion of things, which is we're simply no damn good. And one of the things that I've never understood, is Calvin's theology and the idea of predestination. Every time I look at it and try to grasp it again, I think to myself, now who the heck would even want to believe in that? Because predestination, you can be the most pious, sanctified person on the face of the earth, but if you got the wrong bingo number, you're going in the downshoot. Oh, so all of these things, an Orthodox Christian, the last thing they want is someone's remake, second guessing of the Savior, second guessing of Scripture. But we have a problem as Orthodox Christians because, as Nectario said at the beginning, we don't even understand what we have. So we walk around in ignorance and we pick up all kinds of weird and strange things, okay? So this is one of the challenges for us as Orthodox Christians, which is know who we are. So now we're going to wade into some real sort of Father Chet stuff, okay? I have said this in certain settings, and I've been challenged and all the rest, and I think I've defended myself relatively well, but I still get challenged. When you look at the religious scene in America, I'm limiting it geographic, in America, who do you think we Orthodox Christians have the most common connection to? Who's most like us?
Orthodox Jews.
Okay, Reader Nectario says Orthodox Jews. Who else?
Roman Catholic.
Okay, Seraphima says,
Traditional Roman Catholic.
let's put two categories there. There's traditionalist Catholics and, I'm forgetting it, Novus Ordo, okay, Catholics. What else? If I'd asked that question 100 years ago, almost the universal answer would have been Anglicans. Yeah. Things have changed in 100 years. All right, anybody else? Well, my position is the same. When we look around, if there's some kind of affinity and relationship, it is with Orthodox Jews. Now, there's a qualifier there. I just said Orthodox Jews, as opposed to, which would be parallel with Protestant Christians, right? Okay. Or conservative Jews, which would be parallel with Roman Catholics. Okay. We're all aware of that? Is this news? Anybody want to argue about it? Yeah, well, there it is. Okay. So Orthodox Jews. So we Orthodox Christians, if in fact we are observant Orthodox Christians. Now that I just used a phrase which is very common for Jews. People speak of observant Orthodox Jews. That means what?
They work really hard to follow all the laws that they're aware of.
They're living.
Okay,
They're living.
exactly. Yeah, and I like that phrase. They're living it. Okay. Now Seraphima just said they struggle hard to observe the law. Okay. And all of the different things through Talmud and all that. Okay.
Another way of saying it is, it's a life. I hate to use the word it's a lifestyle because that implies a choice. I think
Yeah.
it is a choice, but it suffuses your entire life.
Exactly. Man, oh man. We're using exactly the same kind of track here. Sometimes people will say lifestyle, okay? But I think the thing that's important to grasp here at this point in this session is Orthodox Christianity is not just another denomination. We're not high church Anglicans who really do it well, nice singing, nice movements, enough incense that the priest disappears in the Shekinah, all of that, okay? It is beautiful, okay? And once in a while, I just have to put on a CD or something else and trip down memory lane so I can remember things that were formative for me in my own faith. But Orthodox Christianity is how we live our lives. It's not a rule book, okay? Oh, got to do these things. It becomes simply who you are. If you watch and observe an Orthodox Jew, they do a really good job of their own apologetics. And you know, when the child in the Orthodox Jewish home says, "Why do we do that?" the response is, "Because we are Jews." Simple. Nothing else needs to be said.
Here we are.
Yes. And unfortunately, we Orthodox Christians fall into the religion Americana trap of when our kids question something, we panic and think we're losing them because it's too long or it's too this or it's whatever else. And one of the things we do, we hear even from the top sphere, is we got to lighten things up, okay? Or we're going to lose all the kids or something, okay? Well, okay, we're living in a time now in which we see young people. I don't even know how to define young people anymore. Let's say 35 and under, okay? The older I get, the younger 35 looks, I can tell you that. But let's just take that and, down. What kind of religion are they embracing? No?
Well,
There are the nuns and the duns.
they kind of go in two directions.
Yeah.
In one direction, they kind of go to an experiential religion, like you go to the Ark and you hear the banjos and the guitars and all that. But there are also people who want to have their feet held to the fire. They want structure.
Structure,
And they
discipline, authenticity, historicity, all of those things.
To know that they are engaging in some sort of worship of something holy.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that strikes people who come into the Orthodox Church, where it's foreign to them what's going on. Obviously, liturgy itself may be very foreign to them, but the thing that strikes them is they're acting like something holy is going on here. They're worshiping.
They're worshiping. Now, Seraphima said none. Okay. Up until quite recently, the whole fascination with nuns and duns that came from a Pew survey was reflecting a certain kind of generational thing. There's been a big shift. When I spoke to Theology on Tap in Kichai sometime this past fall, I mean, one of the things that was coming out of the mouths of them there is nuns and duns. It's passé now. Now we're on a different path. We're looking for the very sorts of things that Reader Nectarios just described. Yeah. Now, I sent a picture to. Yeah, I think that thing's too loud. So we had a group of Methodist kids here the other day from Bellevue. Did I say that right? Bel Air. Bellevue is the mental hospital in New York, right? Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. So there you go. So up near Concordia, it's Bellevue. Got it. Okay. There was one girl in the group who was asking just the right questions, but there was a young man there. He's like an 8th or 9th grader. I was just like, my gosh, this kid had it. And when I found out he had sort of run through Stephen Runciman and all of these, I mean, these are like heavy reads about Eastern Christianity and Eastern Orthodoxy. He had things to say to me about Hagia Sophia and all of that. And I just wanted to sign the kid up for seminary. It's like, let me grease you up. Let me grease you up now next Saturday and send you off to seminary. He had it down, but his level of enthusiasm for having discovered Eastern Christianity and a whole different thing, as part of his exploration of his Methodist faith, as that was his assignment, I just thought, gosh, I should have this kid recorded because he was just so articulate. But his enthusiasm was also something that was remarkable. One of the questions he said to me, he said, aren't Protestants iconoclast? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I thought, boy, for a Methodist 9th grader to ask me a question like that, I mean, that's really good. So we're seeing something, that's happening. And things do kind of run in cycles. But my point that I'm trying to make here, and probably not making it very well, is when we're looking at Orthodox Christianity in our time, we have to take it serious like an Orthodox Jew takes their faith serious. And so even though from within the house we're still hearing, gotta lighten things up here, the answer is no. Now, having said that, I've been asked to do one of the workshops at the Parish Life Conference on maintaining balance in your spiritual life, okay? Well, the reason I think that came up in a topic is there is the one extreme in which everything gets melted down to where you look like an Episcopalian, okay? Not much there. That great saying, which is no one from the Pope to Mao Zedong can be sure they're not an Episcopalian because it's just that broad. And then you've got the other extreme where you get the really, 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 really ultra-Orthodox people that are so darn Orthodox, they're like the only Orthodox left in the world, and then their diocese is a monastery somewhere on a mountain where you have Father Superior and Brother Inferior, and they're operating the real Orthodox world. We don't need those kinds of extremes. When you're actually just simply observing the faith, it's a balance naturally. It just keeps you balanced naturally. So when we're walking the walk as an Orthodox Christian, we need another set of eyes, and that's another topic that we'll get to at some point in terms of spiritual direction. But we need another person walking with us who will actually pull us up short when we need to be, but put the Band-Aids on and medicate us when that needs to be done as well. And in order for that to happen, it's got to be a real soul friend. Now we understand, we have Orthodox spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers and father confessors, and we'll get to that when we get to confession here. But there's also just simply what I would call the soul friend. That's just somebody that you're close enough to that you can actually let the guard down. And that's why I think there are many things about the 12-step programs that actually also line up beautifully with traditional Orthodox spirituality if you're working them correct. Both sides. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let me stop and take a pause there. Any other further things that you'd like to know about what I said that our closest identity is with Orthodox Jews?
I would like to comment, though, that I think we have a tremendous amount of freedom within the structure that the church gives us, as opposed to what I imagine or think I imagine that Orthodox Jews have.
Okay, freedom like this. When does the Sabbath begin for an Orthodox Jew?
The sun goes down.
On what day? Friday. Okay. Okay. The Sabbath meal is a big thing in a Jewish household. The Sabbath meal, the Sabbath meal, they begin to prepare themselves for the Sabbath. Orthodox Christians begin their Sunday worship when? Saturday night. Okay. It is the same. And something that's really quite beautiful is the lighting of the lamps at Great Vespers and the lighting of the lamps at the Sabbath meal. And why are Jews doing it not in the temple, but at the home? Because there is no temple. Okay, so this is another beautiful thing. And there are people who would like nail me to the back wall of hearing me say this, but I'll back it up, and my spiritual father backs me up, and his spiritual father backs him up, so I'm in a nice lineage. In an Orthodox Christian home, who really is the priest who's keeping things in order?
Mother.
It is the mother. What? So what am I talking about?
Well, the mother really guides the dietary journey of the family, and she is in the home most of the day. If you talk to some people who remember their mothers and grandmothers in traditional Orthodox families, they'll tell you that Mama sensed the house every night.
Yes. And sent the children off, making the sign of the cross over them like this, and they left the house. Okay? So it is the mother in the sense that is the priest of the household in terms of keeping the cycle and the rhythm of the faith going. Okay? Now the father must set the tone and do what the father is supposed to do, which is to manage things, make things are surely observed. But the real function there, the prayer corner and the lighting of the lamps and those kinds of things, particularly food. You've said food, okay? Orthodox Jews, there are certain things they can't eat. There are certain things you eat a certain time of the year, certain time you don't, okay? What's that sound like?
Like us. us.
Sounds like us. There are ways in which prayers are said. Okay? Just like us. What else?
Morning and evening prayers, is that Jewish too?
Yes? Okay. This one gets really thorny. But again, in Orthodox Christianity, we say there are times for conjugal relations between the husband and the wife, and there are not times for conjugal relations. Okay, there are times when you abstain. I can tell you as a priest, I have really come, in terms of as a father confessor, around to saying basically this, that particular aspect is one of those things that requires a certain level of spiritual maturity, because if you try to take everything on in one giant gulp when you're coming into Orthodoxy, in terms of eating and conjugal relations and God knows what all, it sinks the ship, and one often finds that one falls into greater sin trying to be strict about certain things like that, especially in an age of pornography and other kinds of things like that. I know that as a father confessor, so you have to work at and get that other set of eyes and getting your spiritual father to help you attain a certain level of spiritual maturity where things again are just simply more natural. I have a friend who went on Mount Athos and spoke to one of the very respected elders there, and he said to him, "When does my struggle with sexual passion end?" And this very venerable and aged abbot said, "I don't know." And the guy was like, "What?" And he said, "I'm still struggling." Yeah. So there you go.
Another aspect of, or another parallel is with some of the great, searching for the word, great happenings in life. The birth of a child, the churching of the child, churching
Yes.
of the mother.
We Orthodox Christians are observing everything we just heard with this feast of the meeting. We have the 8-day naming, okay? We have the churching, the presentation in the temple, the offering, okay? All of those things. Yeah, the rhythm is still there. I remember, gosh, I can't tell you what year it was, but I was already Orthodox when the 700 Club discovered Jewish feast days and holidays. They were like losing their minds in joy. It's like, isn't this a cool thing? So what did those evangelical Protestants start to do? Imitating what Jews do on their festivals. But let me tell you, if you were to actually say to Pat Robertson and company, you realize we Orthodox Christians are keeping the feasts that are all centered around Scripture and the life of Christ. Oh no, get behind me, you idol worshippers. Yes, it's all there. But that means that, again, we face a certain kind of bias. So to circle way back to where I said earlier in this session, the visitor to the Orthodox Church says, "Man, that was weird." It's not weird. It's just that so much has happened to Orthodox worship, especially in our cultural context here, that people have forgotten what 2,000 years of Christian worship actually looks like. Anybody want to argue with that? One of the things that...
I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying that in Orthodox worship it's been changed in modern times?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm not following.
It's been forgotten. There's a wonderful book by, I think again, he was an Anglican monastic, Dom Gregory Dix.
Yes.
It's called The Shape of the Liturgy. And it's
Yep.
this magisterial encyclopedic view looking at all the different liturgies, East and West. As it turns out, they all come from the same root, more or less. And if you put them side by side, you begin to see, oh, that's that. But we've forgotten that.
We've forgotten all of those things.
It's one of the things Schmemann did is that he reintroduced us to what we already had. We just didn't understand it. The Orthodox Orthodox Church had forgotten its own legacy.
Okay.
I'm amazed when we visit a Protestant church nowadays, how different it is from where I grew up. They don't even say the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, it's become more and more entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah, more and more.
You don't even see a cross anywhere. It's like a big
Yeah.
screen up there. We had a church that was taken over. There used to be a big cross up in the middle, and they covered it all with black.
Do you,
Because it was better.
okay, I'm going to give you one example, and then we'll wrap it up because it's 8 o'clock. Fox News has this whole thing on the saints.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
On the website.
yeah. It's not so much Fox News, but it's Fox News advertising them. Yeah, exactly. The one about Joseph, the betrothed. When I found out Joel Osteen was the main advisor, I thought, no wonder Joseph looks like he's a Chad out, ready to seduce Mary. It's just awful, awful. Yeah. But what are they missing by going to Joel Osteen?
Well, he doesn't know it.
He doesn't know it. Isn't there? The received tradition of the church isn't there. Okay, that was a wild ride here this evening, but it should tee us up nicely for next week when we're looking at Mary and the saints and prayer. And, I'll say it next week, but I'll say it now. One of the things that's just amazing is if anything should be unifying us as Christians, it should be our understanding of the Mother of God and her role in the economy of salvation. And in fact, it's something that divides us. Because again, when you cut yourself off from the tradition of the church, what do you have? A Christmas card.
You can't talk Christology without talking about Mama.
Yeah.
No
Yep.
way.
All right, you've been very patient. Good night to the Zoomers. Good.